Hi, I'm Dave Cut, and you're watching another Comic Chat. What's up, guys? Back again today with the second edition of Peter Parker Spider-Man Back in Black. And in the first one, we saw Peter Parker's on the run from the law because he decided to join Captain America after revealing his secret identity to the world in the Sokovia Accords. And after Captain America fell, Peter ended up going on the run, and in the first book, we saw Kingpin putting a hit on Spider-Man, but Aunt May getting in the way. So this picks up after that. As we can see, all of the chapters we're going through, and the sensational Spider-Man, number 35. And they even put in the variant cover for you by Clayton Crane. Pretty cool. So this story starts out as the sensational Spider-Man, with a couple characters that you should probably know along the way. So we have, of course, Spider-Man. We have Calvin Zabo slash Mr. Hyde. If you don't know who he is, he's kind of like Dr. Jackal, Mr. Hyde, where he takes a formula and he gains enormous strength. We also have Kirk Connors, who also takes a formula and turns into a giant lizard. We have Reed Richards, of course, from the Fantastic Four, as well as Aunt May. So this story starts out with someone trying to break into an apartment at 3 a.m. and Spider-Man stopping them. So this is the strange case of part 1 of 3. And unknown to Spider-Man, this wasn't actually a burglar. This was actually a sting operation set up by the police. But Spider-Man willingly turns himself over, but as they're taking him into custody, he's telling them he's not Peter Parker. And as they remove his mask, they actually see that this is actually Ethan Myers. And this started a lot of confusion because where did this Spider-Man come from? But after the detectives sit down and actually talk to him, they don't really find out much because he was just walking down the street when a car pulled up and asked if he wanted to be a hero. And when he got in the car, he was knocked out and woke up in a strange room where he talked to no one. But after eating the food and after a couple of days, he started noticing that he was adapting powers. And one day, he woke up and found that there was a Spidey suit on his bed. So after he put it on, he got knocked out again and woke up on a rooftop where he decided to start saving lives, but he got immediately caught. So we see Spider-Man swinging over to the jail where Ethan's being held, telling him he needs to discuss some issues of copyright infringement, but Ethan's actually in so much pain that Spider-Man ends up just ripping a hole straight through the wall, where he finds Ethan being consumed or transforming into something, and Spider-Man doesn't know what to do, and Ethan has no idea what's happening to him. So he ends up busting him out of the jail and taking him straight to the hospital, where he tells the jailers to call ahead and call for Reed Richards. 25 minutes later, on the roof of the hospital, because Spider-Man has to meet there so he can avoid the cops, he meets with Reed Richards to hand off Ethan to get looked at. And Reed Richards doesn't know what's happening either, but he's kind of fascinated by the metamorphosis that's happening. But he does agree to help because Spider-Man is a friend. Spider-Man then decides to take the blanket that Ethan was wrapped up in to get the fluids on it checked, and ends up going to Dr. Kirk Connors to help. And Kirk Connors is, of course, happy to help him since he saved his son's life. He just needs a little bit of time to analyze it. As the black suit Spider-Man swings away, we see another Spider-Man swinging to a ledge and just barely not making it. As he falls to his death, people could tell he's not Spider-Man when they took the mask off. They say, that's not Spider-Man. Spider-Man's not Chinese. And someone else joking saying, no shit. As we cut to the Lower East Side, we see this new Spider-Man walking down the street with a girl when a man approaches him in a car. The man, as we know as Zabo, tells him that he's just killed his mother, and if he doesn't get in the car and come with him right now, then he'll kill his girlfriend too. And of course, that's how he ended up getting him to go with him. Sensational Spider-Man, number 36. The Strange Case of, part 2 of 3. So this one starts out 6 days ago with Black Suit Spider-Man talking with another Spider-Man who looks more spider than man, as he pleads with him to come with him so he could help him. This Spider-Man just says, "Oh, you're just jealous of me," as Black Suit Spider-Man tells him, "If you don't come with me right now, you're gonna die. You're sick. Your life, your choice." Back at the apartment slash lab for Dr. Kirk Connors, we see the Spider-Man actually agreed to go back with Peter to get help. And Kirk Connors not finding a cure quite yet, so Peter says he's going to go back out and try to hunt down the rest of them that are out there. So back at the precinct, we see these detectives are actually questioning a bunch of different kinds of Spider-Men that were mysteriously brought in by someone who they believe is the Black Suit Spider-Man. As they bring in Kirk Connors and letting him know that he's there to help them, he tells them that they're running out of time and that eventually that they will be more spider than human. But as he talks with them, they say that they don't really mind. They don't care. In fact, that some of them had it worse off before and that they didn't want to go back, even with the serum. As we cut to somewhere hidden, we see Jordan Harrison is locked away, and it seems like Dr. Zabo has another one in his clutches. And as he pleads out asking why, Calvin Zabo says, "You don't even realize. It's because you're just like Peter Parker, and therefore the ideal control subject." The next day, Peter goes to Chevy's to meet up with Reed Richards to see if he had found an antidote or anything that could help. And Reed ends up telling him that he found out that there was a tracker hidden on him. And they start to realize that this person had actually experimented on them, tagged them, and sent them out into the world to be recaptured later on, but things didn't go exactly as he planned. So it was a starting point for Peter, and that was all he needed to know. As Reed tells him, "I think I know a place where you should start." So then we cut to underneath Manhattan, where we see Spider-Man following a tracer and Zabo contemplating why his experiments failed, why Peter Parker was orphaned at such a young age and then still chose to do good with the power that he got, and why none of these other test subjects were turning out to be like him. As he notices Black Suit Spider-Man shows up, he goes and grabs a formula and says, "The next voice you hear won't be mine, but that of my associate, Edward Hyde, the Sensational Spider-Man, number 37. And this starts out with Zabo going through his transformation into Mr. Hyde before setting out to face Black Suit Spider-Man. As we see Spider-Man making his way through the tunnels, he finds this underground prison where all these Spider-Men must have been kept before being released back out into the public. And him actually finding one more person, Jordan, who was left behind and still trapped there. As Jordan calls out Mr. Parker, we see that he actually knows Jordan, that he's one of the former students of Peter Parker's. He tells him to hold on, that'll get him out of there, but as hard as he tries, he can't seem to break the glass. As we see Mr. Hyde finally showing up. So back at the precinct, we see Felicia show up, or Black Cat, to help detectives capture another Spider-Man, her believing it was the last one, only to find out that there was still someone here looking for her lost son. And we see that Zabo actually didn't kill Jordan's mom. He had just lied to get him to go with him. As we go back to the imminent fight at hand, we see Mr. Hyde charge at Spider-Man as Spider-Man quickly dodges and Mr. Hyde crashes into the glass. Spider-Man pleads with him, telling him he doesn't have to do this, but Mr. Hyde, not listening, crashes into Spider-Man and pushes him through a wall. Spider-Man hits him with an oldie but a goldie and webs up a steam pipe and breaks it over Mr. Hyde's head. Now, Jordan notices that the glass is finally cracked and figures if he applies enough pressure to the right point, he can break it, and that's exactly what he does. As we see Spider-Man continue to fight, Mr. Hyde's telling Spider-Man that he did this to dissect your psyche, and he wanted to see what really drives men like you. We see Jordan escaping into a room and finding chemicals that he say are dangerous. As the battle continues between Spider-Man and Mr. Hyde, he slams Spider-Man into the wall. As they continue to talk, we see Jordan appear holding a flask full of chemicals. As he gets ready to throw it at Mr. Hyde, Spider-Man tries to stop him and says Hyde may deserve to die, but not by the hands of Jordan. So later we see Peter's on the roof talking with Felicia about what had happened and how the potent acid that Jordan had made nearly burned off Mr. Hyde's face completely. It blinded him, and after that, it wasn't much before Peter had beat him unconscious. Black Cat saying all's well and ends well, but Peter's telling her not completely. Zabo created all those versions of him to prove that given the right circumstances, family member's tragic death, that someone like him would be driven to embrace the dark. And that's exactly what happened. Jordan would have killed Dr. Hyde if Peter didn't stop him, and he came so close. And even though Dr. Hyde had lied about killing his family and everything else, he will still have to live with that part of him always knowing. So this is the Sensational Spider-Man, number 38. And you can see here lies Eddie Brock. So this story starts off with Eddie Brock looking kind of frail walking through a hospital, reminiscing over his life back when he was young and he was happy, but also blaming Peter Parker for everything that went wrong in his life, with the Sinclair scandal that wrecked his career to his first suicide attempt that was interrupted by an alien symbiote looking for a host, saying it's Parker's fault again. Even the countless times that he was humiliated as the villain Venom, mostly at the hands of Peter Parker. And he says even when he got his death sentence and he found out that he had terminal cancer, he says, haven't figured out how Parker's responsible for that yet, but I will. Even going down and saying my conversation and decision to sell my symbiote to the highest bidder, even a villain. And then he says, even a second, more successful suicide attempt when I learned that my good intentions were all for naught, since the new Venom was killing innocents indiscriminately. A man is born, he lives, he dies. And as he walks through the hospital, he thinks he's alone, but he says he's not haunted by just memories. And this is The Last Temptation of Eddie Brock, Part 1. And he is haunted by more than memories, as we see that none of that he tried to do got rid of Venom. He tells Eddie that he's been around the whole time, even after everything that he's tried to do to him, trying to sell him as cattle, tried to have doctors biopsy him, and try to set him free, After all of that, Venom's still there. And now he's just waiting for him to die. And he says at the end, and I started to wonder why. Was I a part of something, a greater design? So this is definitely a different story than in the movies. This one, Eddie hates Venom, and kind of seems like Venom hates Eddie. As everything's starting to make sense to him now, he sees that Peter Parker was actually Spider-Man the whole time, and he sees that Spider-Man's actually wearing the black suit again, and Venom saying, well, just like old days. And he starts to freak out, saying maybe his story isn't finished just yet. Maybe he was being saved for something, and just then he sees Aunt May and MJ are actually in the same hospital as him. And he says, how is this even possible? Parker's family's here with me, delivered to me. As he runs away, and Venom stopping him, saying, stop, Eddie, asking so many questions and toughen up. This is what we were waiting for. As we go inside the hospital bedroom where Aunt May and MJ are, we see MJ kind of blaming herself for everything that happened, saying that the bullet was actually meant for her and that Peter had dove and pushed her out of the way, and that's why it flew and hit her. And that Aunt May needed to keep fighting because not just for the sake of MJ, but for the sake of Peter, for honestly the sake of the world, because who knows what's going to happen when Aunt May dies. As we see Spider-Man rushing off, fighting some bad guys along the way. And after he gets done webbing them up, he asks the victim to call the cops, and she's kind of like, that's it? Call the cops. She's kind of giving him a hard time, saying that this is her first time being mugged, and he should ask if she's all right, and she's supposed to comfort her. But Spider-Man doesn't really have time. He asks if she's all right, and then he just off since she's all right. So Spider-Man finally reaches his destination, and as he's crawling through the window, we see he's there to meet with none other than Madam Web, and he's come to ask for her help. And what he's asking her to do is basically a seance for Aunt May. But Madam Web tells him your Aunt May isn't dead. But Peter says they gotta be something that they can do, there gotta be some way to reach her. And Madam Web actually telling him that there is a way to do what he is asking, but the only way that it's going to happen is if that Aunt May wants to be reached. And she tells him that she'll try and that she had actually decided before he crawled through the window. She had a suitcase with the necessary accoutrements packed and ready to go already. As we cut back to the hospital, we see Eddie arguing with Venom over how did these things happen? None of it made sense. How did his greatest enemy's family end up here helpless and unprotected? What could that even mean? And Venom even telling him, so here's the bitter, bitter truth, Eddie. No one is truly innocent. Not Peter, not his wife, not his aunt. No one. Or else they wouldn't be here like lambs to the slaughter. And ultimately, a person's guilt or innocence isn't for us to decide. As he urges him to do the harvesting, Eddie questions him, but, and Venom says, no buts, Eddie. You've been handed an opportunity here to make your little poultry life count for something. I'm not going to let you waste that because you don't have the necessary guts. As we see Venom giving Eddie a little present, and it's none other than his own little black suit. He says it's cheap nylon, it hangs loosely on the body. It's nothing like the symbiote, but it's everything. The only thing that he needs now is... And that brings us to the Sensational Spider-Man number 39. In New York City, on the brink, with the last temptation of Eddie Brock, part 2 of 2. Here we see Eddie in his black suit Spider-Man costume, perched on top of the roof of the hospital, where he's reminiscing about how he used to own the night, and we see Venom chiming in how we used to own the night, and reminding him how the nurse is coming back pretty soon, and he should scurry back down because this first one is just practice. And back downstairs, we see the nurse enter into Eddie's room, completely dark, as Eddie, in his full Spider-Man costume, closes the door behind her and pulls out a scalpel. And as she pleads for her life, calling out, "Please, Mr. Brock," he tells her that's not his name and charges at her. And unfortunately, she doesn't make it. But Eddie starts to feel a little guilty about it, and Venom ends up reminding him how she interrupted his sleep as often as she did, and for taking his blood and always missing his veins, for the condescending pity in her eyes whenever she looked your way. And Eddie finally agreeing with him that it was the right thing to do. As Venom seems pretty proud of Eddie's decision, Eddie questions about May Parker, and Venom reminds him again how she raised the guy who destroyed his entire life, everything but, Venom, and telling him not to chicken out now, and Brock saying that he won't and that he's ready because he can see that there's only going to be a small opportunity to give the old Biddy what she was begging for. In the next room, we can see Peter finally making it to the hospital and starting to set up to prepare to start the seance. Even bringing in Felicia Hardy, a.k.a. the Black Cat, to stand guard, and MJ, and even Anna Watson, MJ's aunt, and a close friend of Aunt May, just to be sure. As they all hold hands around the table, Madam Web tells them to think of the memory that would bond them closest to Aunt May, the one that was the strongest connection between them, as she starts chanting in a different language that they can't understand. Peter decides to think of the night that Uncle Ben died, how the ambulances and the police cars were in the driveway, and how Aunt May comforted him. And he knows that any one of them can apparently find her, but he's really hoping it was going to be him. And as he's flashing back to that night, Aunt May actually makes contact, saying in some ways, I don't think she had ever moved beyond that terrible night. And she says, "Hello, dear. Have you come to say goodbye?" And Peter freaks out, saying, "What do you mean, say goodbye? He's here to bring her back." And she tells him she's tired. They've been down this road too many times. And Peter questions her, "Are you giving up, Aunt May?" And Aunt May just telling him, she was shot. even if she wanted to come back, as he would say, she doesn't think that her body would even let her. But Peter still pleads with her, telling her that that bullet was meant for him and that he won't let her die in his place. But she tells him how many years would she actually have left, and if that bullet had struck him instead of her, then think of all the good that would be undone from that. But Peter says that, nah, he can't accept that. But Aunt May tells him, you have to, and you have to make it count for the rest of your life. As she walks away from Peter, we see at the same time, in the very room where Aunt May's being held, at the very same moment, we see Eddie Brock sneaking in as a doctor and putting on the mask and hesitating as Venom says, "What are you waiting for?" And Eddie finally saying, "Nothing." Peter's still pleading out for Aunt May to come back, saying, "Where's she going? What's in that house?" And Aunt May telling Peter, "Listen to me, Peter. Grow old with your wife, the way your Uncle Ben did with me." And Peter calling out, "Aunt May, what's... No, behind you." And her just saying, "Have many children. Let them bring you as much joy as you have brought me." And Peter still begging out, "Aunt May, don't." As she finally says, "Goodbye, Peter." She disappears through the door, and it slams shut as Peter starts freaking out. And Madam Web telling everybody not to break concentration. We see Peter just banging on the door as he can't get through. And finally, it's over, and Madam Web says the energies are draining. So back in the hospital room, we can see Eddie standing over Aunt May, kind of having a breakdown, talking with Venom. Venom questioning her, why isn't she dead? Him saying, shut up, he can't concentrate. And Venom laughing, like, concentrate? What do you need to concentrate for? Just crush her windpipe or smother her with a pillow or unplug her machine or slit her throat. Giving all these suggestions, freaking him out while Eddie's just saying, shut up. And Venom finally just saying, ooh, touchy, kind of egging him on. As Brock just saying, let me think, you're not letting me think. Venom tells him, you think after all these years, Eddie, haven't you learned this isn't a partnership, it's a dictatorship. Now do as you're told. And as Peter and everybody else are walking the hall after having the seance, Peter's telling them how he actually made contact and there was something else there. And then all of a sudden his spider sense goes off and he says, there's something wrong, as he runs off and rushes to Aunt May's door and opens it just to find none other than Eddie Brock sitting on a broken windowsill as he tells Peter that Aunt May's all right. He wanted me to hurt her, but I wouldn't. The nurse, yes, but not someone so as innocent and as good as your aunt. And Peter kind of questioning him, not knowing what's going on. Who wanted you to hurt Aunt May? He tells him, he was inside me all along. I thought I could get rid of him, but he was inside all this time. And Peter still not know what he's talking about. Eddie tells him, our friend, but I cut him out. I cut him out of me. You can see he finally reveals his arms as he has a ton of cuts all over his arms. He says, look how I cut him out. Peter's horrified, saying, oh my God, Eddie. Eddie says, I've done terrible things, as he steps in the windowsill. But I'm not a terrible person, as he falls backward out the windowsill. And as Eddie falls to his death, he asks for forgiveness. And Peter shoots some webs and saves his life. But when Eddie wakes up in the hospital, he's surprised he's still alive. And Venom's actually the one that tells him that Peter's the one that saved him. And then Eddie freaks out even more, surprised that Venom's still there. After he tried to cut him out of him, Venom tells him, oh yeah, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere, Eddie. And Eddie finally coming to terms with that, saying, fine with me. Now that we know who's in charge. Okay. And this is The Sensational Spider-Man number 40. And we start out in the borough of Queens, in the city of New York, with a boy whose name was Peter. And this boy was blameless and upright, with a good heart who never turned toward evil. Despite an early tragedy he didn't even remember, it seemed as if there was a protective wall around him and his house, his uncle, and his aunt on every side. Except when Peter was away from home at school. But then, as it has been in high school, so will it ever be. The boy bore this daily humiliation bravely, never letting them taint his soul. And for whatever reason, his belief that the world was basically a good place never really wavered. Growing up, he never craved glory or greatness. He wanted simply to be content, and had faith that he would be. Until the day, like a serpent slithering into a garden, a certain spider lowered itself into his life and cursed the good boy named Peter, as we see the spider bite him, or blessed him, though that depends on who's telling the story, and in the end, which side, good or evil, wins. One thing was for certain, though. From that faithful day on, it was as if a dark cloud settled over Peter Parker and followed him home that terrible night, as we see the night when he let the criminal go by and it turned out that he kills and shoots Uncle Ben. And as Spider-Man goes after this criminal, he has a moment of truth. Who can say what a weaker person would have done? Turned from goodness, cursed the heavens, forsaken everything honorable and decent in the world? Possibly, but not Peter Parker. He actually ended up turning him in. And as devastating as it was, his uncle's death was only the first of many trials Peter would endure over the years. Of course, there were more deaths. His arch enemy, the Green Goblin, as he's impaled by his own glider. His first and some say truest love, Gwen Stacy, as she hit her head and snapped her back backward. And on to the present. To his Aunt May, who lies in the hospital bed barely hanging on. As we see MJ walking into the hospital room, checking on Peter, asking if he's doing okay because he does not look that great. And him telling her that all things considered, no, he is not doing good. He's not doing good at all. And instead, he's actually gonna go out and, he says, blow off some steam to hurt something. So we see through the city there's a loud clang, clang, clang. And we come to find out that it's actually Peter, and he's in an alleyway beating up some dumpsters when he's approached by a strange man who says he's not looking for any trouble, but Peter's not in any mood to talk to anyone. But the strange man offers to buy Peter some food, even calling him by his name. But that doesn't really shock Peter because ever since he unmasked, everybody knows who he is. And the mysterious man tells him that his hands are pretty messed up. And Peter says, yeah, he knows, but he heals fast. And the old man says, you're welcome, Peter. And Peter's shocked to look down at his hands and to see that they're completely healed. And Peter says, you snuck up on me and my spider sense didn't go off. Who are you? And the mysterious man says, come on, Peter, you know who I am. As he flashes powers at him, Peter comes to an understanding and just says yes. And this mysterious man says, all right then, lunch, some food, my treat. As they sit down to eat, the mysterious man notices that Peter's not eating any of his food. And Peter says he doesn't really have much of an appetite. And the mysterious man tells him he needs to eat to keep his strength up. And Peter kind of harshly reacts as saying, is that what I need to eat? Going even further, saying, I know you're busy and an omnipotent, and I'm just some fleck, this nothing. But since we're here, since we're breaking bread, maybe you wouldn't mind telling me if my aunt dying is all part of your cosmic scheme, your grand design for my pitiful life. And this mysterious man just says, if I told you it were, what would you do, Peter? As Peter thinks about it for a couple seconds, he says, I would beg you to save her. I would tell you I'd give up anything to save her. As he questions even being Spider-Man, and no hesitation, he says, in a heartbeat, if you could rewrite my life story so that that spider bites someone else, and I'm spared all the death I've experienced over the years, my Uncle Ben, Gwen, her father, Harry, you could do that, couldn't you? And the mysterious man looks at him for a sec and just says, I want to take you somewhere. So I'm kind of guessing that this guy's probably Death. They flash to the beach and Peter asks where they are, and Death says they're at Coney Island. And Peter actually remembers coming here as a kid with Uncle Ben and Aunt May. And Death says, take a walk with me down the border. And Peter asks, did I do something bad to deserve this? Is being Spider-Man punishment for something that I committed in the past life? And Death says, no, not at all. And Peter's just trying to understand, saying, okay, so is it a test? Because if I'm being tested, then let me fail, because I have to tell you, I'm this close to breaking. And Death just telling him it's not a test. And Peter begging, just please, can you explain? Just let me know. Let me understand why. And Death finally breaks and says, oh, Peter, Peter, Peter. Human suffering is one of the mysteries. It happens for no good reason. And the people who endure it, it doesn't always make them better. You're one of the rare exceptions. Usually, it makes them worse. It happens to everyone, though. Hard to explain why it's necessary to someone who hasn't been there for the foundation of Earth, or when the first walls were built around the oceans. What's the point of anything then? I mean, if it's beyond understanding. As they continue to walk, they come up on a sea of people. As Death says, well, for starters, there's some of the point, Peter. And Peter, stunned, asks who they are. And Death tells him they're an itsy bitsy teeny weeny sampling of the thousands upon thousands of people you've saved as Spider-Man over the years. Parents, children, grandparents, entire families. Thousands upon thousands. And, of course, he's counting team-ups and everything else, but, it's kind of weird. You forget. You pass into their lives, then out of them, and in a matter of minutes, or even seconds, you forget that their lives continue after you swing away. They go back to their homes, their jobs, their apartments, but because something you did, you, Peter Parker, their life keeps moving. As they continue to walk along the beach, Peter thanks Death for what he did, saying that was nice, and Death just saying, you're welcome. It doesn't really answer any of your questions. It doesn't really make the suffering any more bearable, does it? And Peter just responding with no. And Death tells him, we all have a purpose, Peter. We all have a role to play. This, fortunately or unfortunately, is yours. And if it's any consolation, I've asked a lot more from people much closer to me than you. And Peter responds, it's like we're all pieces of plankton adrift in the ocean, at the mercy of forces we can't control. As Peter finally lets out one last plea, I don't want my aunt to die. Please don't let her die. And Death just says, I have faith. And Peter turning and saying what, as he ends up back in the alley, and Death disappears. So, how does this story end? For the moment, let's just say it doesn't end here. In the alley behind the hospital in New York City. Let's say it ends many, many years from now, with the man Peter Parker and his family surviving whatever hardships come their way, with Peter growing old and white-haired alongside the woman he loves, and their children, Benjamin and Mary. Let's say it ends with all of them blessed with the Book of Peter. So next we have the Sensational Spider-Man Annual #1. And this story starts off with Peter having a surprise for MJ. And when she opens her eyes, they're actually on the top of a skyscraper. I don't know about you guys. I don't really like heights. I wouldn't like that, but she seems to love it. She says it's all spread out down there. It looks so tiny and perfect. It looks like an entire world of possibility just waiting for us. Up here, we can be anybody we want. As we flash to earlier, we see Mary Jane going into a coffee shop, but getting stopped by an old friend named Brady, who we can see used to be her old security guard. And her saying, well, isn't he in the wrong coast for this? And him telling her that he got relocated for some security work out here, small world. And offers to buy her a cup of joe and reminisce about old times. And she sells him, Brady, we can sit, we can talk, we can have a cup of coffee and get caught up and do each other's hair and talk about what boys we like, but seriously, you gotta stop saying my name so much and so loud. And he agrees, so they sit down to have a cup of coffee, and Mary Jane starts noticing things about the place, like how there's a new guy working the register, and it kind of catches Brady's eye, because he says, how long have you been coming here? You seem to know all the clerks, huh? She thinks back to when they used to come here in high school, and it used to be the four of them, Mary Jane, Harry Osborn, Gwen Stacy, and Peter Parker, all coming there to have fun, joke around, and she remembers Peter used to always say that he liked it there because it didn't attract a lot of attention and it feels quiet and safe, and it felt like the four of them could stay there forever. As we flash back, she tells Brady she's been going there forever, And Brady finally kind of starting to let the cat out of the bag as he says, "You haven't figured it out yet." And we look around and we can see a bunch of agents watching her, and her just yawning and saying, "Oh no," and him saying, "Oh yeah. You think I haven't read the news in the last 6 months, Mary Jane? You think I don't know who you're married to? Brady O'Brien, agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Give us Peter Parker or you're under arrest." We flash to across town at Hopper's Diner, where we see Peter walk in saying, "I want you to arrest me." And as he sits down, we find out that this is actually Detective Lamont. And Peter tells him, "So I woke up this morning in a $2 squat out." And Detective Lamont urges him not to tell him where. And Peter just says, "In a $2 squat out. And my wife is terrified. My aunt is dying. And I'm forcing her to live in a freaking Hotel 11. He says, "I'm sick and tired of it. I woke up sick and ashamed and embarrassed that this is what I've done to my family. She's dying, Lamont. And I'm hiding like an animal. She's dying and still protecting me. And I know I feel different this afternoon or tonight or tomorrow, but I swear to God, right now, the idea that I'm becoming the man that forces his family to hide to protect him makes me sick. I want you to take me in, and I want total immunity for my family. My whole life, these women, what I've put them through, I want to be there for them for a change." And Lamont kind of butting in here saying, "Sounds to me like these girls of yours can teach you about manning up, Parker. Why would they hang you out to dry?" Parker just pleading, saying, "How much more can we take? You don't know what they had to endure, what all the women in my life had to do to survive." As he flashes back to when they were kids, saying, "Even when we were kids, especially MJ, she's always been my rock. We all clung to each other for survival. And we were all so outclassed. Man, just totally outgunned by those girls. They could play us like fiddles, and we let them." We flash back to the cafe where Brady's telling MJ that she's running out of time, kind of urging her to take this deal, telling her, "Come on, Mary Jane, bring May Parker with you. It's time that the Parker women bring the spider nightmare to an end." And MJ telling him, "End? It'll never end. You don't know what he's lived through, what he's lost, and what it costs him." As she flashes back to when they were kids, saying, "What it costs all of us. We were kids, we were babies, and the thing that just sucked us all in. Life is hard enough when you're, I don't know, growing up but not quite grown up. The thing is, the thing only Pete knew, the burden Pete had to carry all alone. It was his nightmare. We were all just living in it." As we flash back to Peter starting to cry and saying this is no way to live. And Lamont coming over and giving him some tough love as he rips the fake mustache off his face and says, "Don't be an idiot. Think of your wife, Peter." And Peter pulls out a picture of Aunt May and Uncle Ben saying this was his whole world. And ever since Uncle Ben died, things haven't been the same, and kind of pouring his heart out, using Detective Lamont as kind of a therapist. As we cut back to MJ, kind of doing the same thing with Brady, but she recaps the Christmas before Peter and her got together, when she had made him a mixtape to express her feelings for him, and she wanted him to make a mixtape for her as well. But what he actually made her was half an episode of Nova he taped off PBS about rhinos. We flash back to them walking down the street and her questioning him, like, why not music, As we can also see her thoughts running through her head. She says, "Oh God, don't blow this, please, just don't blow this, dummy." He tells her that he does not listen to music. He didn't want to fake it, so he made something that he likes, and he just likes boring and stupid things. As we can see running through her head, she's saying, "I'm a horrible and unlovable hag, and I will die alone." She says in spite of him being a giant nerd, she still got him something. As she pulls out a Santa hat with mistletoe on it, she's thinking, don't freak out, don't freak out. Oh, you freaked him out, you desperate loser." As she's telling him that it's actually mistletoe on there, he kind of abruptly leaves as she's left standing there thinking, alone. You're gonna die alone. Now, Brady's kind of getting fed up. And time's starting to run out for her, but she just says her loyalty runs deep, and she wouldn't give up Peter like that. We can see Peter talking with Lamont, and he actually recaps the same night. We can see him walking down the street, and we can see what Peter's actually thinking during this whole time as he's thinking, oh God, she thinks you're a giant, boring turbo nerd. You totally blew this. Stupid. And that the reason that he gave her the PBS recording was because it was on magnetic fields, you know? Still pretty nerdy, but I get it. Attraction. We can even see what's going through his head as she pulls out the Santa hat with the mistletoe. He knew exactly. He says, oh man, mistletoe means she wants to kiss. And then as he abruptly left her, he's clearly wanted to, but he chickened out as he says, kiss her, you chicken. Chicken, stupid, boring chicken man, as he walks away. And as Lamont gets a page, Peter's spider sense goes off and he tells her that they had just picked up MJ at a coffee shop. And he tells him like he already knows she paged him already. And Lamont lets him go and he says to go save your wife. We can see MJ reminiscing still about the past as Brady is just kind of over the whole thing. As he slams his fist down, he tells her that it's either him or her. As she flashes back to walking Peter to his gate at the airport, we can see what's going through both their minds as he's saying, do it, just grab her, and her thinking the same thing, do it. As he finally grabs her and you can see it's their first kiss. As he leaves, he says, I'll be back, and him thinking, I swear for you, I always will be back. And she thinking, always and forever, I'll be waiting. As we see Lamont break out the cuffs and starting to arrest MJ, he sees that she was actually had a tracker with her the entire time. And that she wasn't actually just reminiscing, she was stalling. As we see Spider-Man crash through the window and in an instant dodges every single one of those agents in there, swoops up MJ and is gone. As we see Brady left standing there saying, stop, you're both under arrest. And as Peter and MJ are swinging away, we can see that MJ's apologizing to Peter because, you know, she got put in that situation and Brady was a person from her past. And we see Peter telling her that you don't ever have to apologize about this. As she tells him that she just wants to go up. He starts swinging higher and higher till they reach the top of a skyscraper. As we see her tell him maybe the rest of the world thinks marriage is something to do between other marriages, but it means something more to her. That Peter's her partner and her husband, and she loves him, and that this is their life. You and me forever, as we see to have and to hold. And that's it, and that's where we leave it with Aunt May on the brink of death, and Peter not being able to help her and still running from the law. And they have some bonus comics in here, but I don't think I'm going to get into that. It doesn't really have anything to do with the story, but this has been the Peter Parker's Spider-Man Back in Black. Next up, we'll do the What If Black in Black, where it's a what if MJ had actually gotten shot instead of Aunt May. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Thanks for hanging out. And until next time, have a good one.